to begin with, and should we? I know I'm asking someone who, you work in polls, this is your job.
A data nerd.
I know, but why do we take it
Well,
so
first of all, I really think that people love hearing about themselves. We all love looking in the mirror. We all want to know who we are, and it's fascinating to see who we are in the aggregate. That's a general understanding of why polls make headlines. And in an election cycle, what better way to figure out what's actually going on beyond all the endless speculation, pontification, chochmalogization, which is like smartification, than reading actual data. The problem is that with so long to go, as you point out, 3 months, and so many unknowns, parties breaking up, merging, emerging, doing all sorts of strange things, people entering the race that we don't know about, the polls are really not worth much than the headline of that day.
And in general, you've worked on both sides of the pond, campaigns on both sides of the pond. Does Israeli polling have a good reputation?
It actually does. And the funny thing is that it's losing that reputation. Lately, people come and say to me, we all know Israeli polling is bad. It's actually not. For the most part, Israeli polling close to the elections becomes very precise. It's tricky. You have to think about how to calculate mandates in Knesset based on percentages. You have to think about how to allocate undecided voters like everywhere. And most importantly, you have to understand those surplus vote rules and agreements between the different parties if they don't get the actual threshold for another mandate. But once you get pretty close to elections, the polling companies are good at it, and they usually do pretty well, with one exception, and that's 2015. And of course, since the last thing we hear influences us, now everybody thinks Israeli polling is inaccurate. Usually the exit polls are pretty accurate in Israel.
Kind of like what you remember from a meal is desserts. The last thing that you eat, and that's what it is.
Well, that is a good point. Let's try to always have good desserts.
I'm sorry, but there was a plethora, Mike, of polls that were published in the last few days after what we talked about earlier in the show, the explosion, the earthquake on the right wing of the map, leaders of the Jewish Home Party leaving their party, basically, and forming this new party called HaYamin He-Hadash, which translates to the new right. And here's just one poll, for example, that we're going to show you, because it said it was asked, do you think Bennett and Shaked, the leaders of the party, did the right thing by leaving the Jewish home? Right move, they say 30% said it was a right move, 27%, here you go, says it was not right, and 43%, the majority say, we don't know. That's actually, I think, would you correct me if I'm wrong, that sounds like solid knowledge, judgment there.
Yeah, that's about what we expect. Who knows at this point? And a lot of people, for them, it doesn't really affect them in the grand scheme of things anyway, because they might not be voters of that particular sector. Every day, either me or somebody on our staff here is asked to come into the studios and analyze the latest polls. And the thing I always try to emphasize is this: a single poll means zero.
Thank you. You have an ally in this
and you're a
pollster. To analyze polls properly.
Okay, but let me. Can I just add to that, because when a single poll is like, let's say, okay, we had 5 or 6 polls that were published, and we can show a few of them on the screen, specifically asking how many seats this new party will get, and it goes all the way from the highest 14 down all the way to 6. So Dahlia, what is the value of all of this?
The value is that it makes nice headlines for the first few days after the party was announced, and that's really what it is. I'm telling you that in another 2 weeks, we're going to have other party formations, various changes in constellations, and the polls are going to look completely different. So, of course, asking that question isn't worth very much, but it does make for an exciting headline. At the same time, that's why you see such wide variation. Depends on how you ask the question, depends on how you calculate the undecideds, and that's why we can't tell anything about how well this party could do unless we look at it in light of historic analysis.
You look at it in light of historic analysis. You also have to look for trends. So you can't just take a 3-day sample. You look at a few weeks' time and you see where things are drifting to and how voters are kind of shifting their opinions on. And then you can kind of draw and say, okay, this is a direction where we apparently are going. And that's what the politicians generally respond to. Benjamin Netanyahu, if he saw Likud's polling go from 35 to 34, he's not panicking that he's going to lose. When it goes from 35 to 29 over the course of 2 months, then they start wondering what's going on here.
You know, Dahlia, there's a lot of talk now about the Israeli center, specifically when it comes to this new contender that we're talking about, former Israeli Chief of Staff Benny Gantz and the guys. No name yet. Well, there is a name. But what exactly does that mean? What is the Israeli center? What is it?
Well, that's an excellent question. What we do know is how big it is. It's about 25 to 30% of Israeli society, which is a huge chunk. That has been pretty stable over the years, but they have rarely expressed their political ideology in numbers in elections that reflect their percentages. What we have for the first time now are 2 parties that are considered to be centrist by Israelis that together total 21 seats. in Knesset. That's already a big breakthrough. By all accounts, we have another party that looks like it's a centrist party. That's Orly Levy's party. She's been polling at about 5 or 6 seats.
Yeah.
And, you know, if those two parties stay at 21, they may not. But we could see the center camp grow somewhat closer to the actual percentage they have in society. Gantz is tricky because we have no idea, because all that he said today, and those were 3 words.
24, by the way. We showed that earlier.
I'm giving you some free advertisement, and we don't know if he's going to position himself in the center.
I wonder what you think, because I've heard a few people say this. The minute he talks, we're going to see his numbers start to drop, Mike.
Listen, I say it's the same thing with my wife at home. The more popular you want to be around here, the less you need to say. And that goes true for most politicians. The second that they open their mouths, the people that already like them to begin with are going to continue to like them. But the ones that don't like what they're going to say, that's when we see the numbers start to fade away. The question becomes, can Gantz develop his ideology, and can he attract enough to his ideology to maybe partner with another ticket? Gantz cannot, I don't think, do it on his own. There's not enough time to establish his principles, his fundamentals.
When you say the ideology and the center, I mean, what is that ideology of the center? What is it?
Let me tell you what the center seems to want. When we ask people who are center voters and everybody else, what is your top priority in the country today?
Yeah.
More than anybody else, the centrists place social and economic issues higher. They are completely assured that everybody will keep Israel secure, so they don't see a reason to vote for the right. Nobody believes in a peace process, so neither do they. They don't see a need to vote for the left.
Okay.
They don't believe politicians in general, but they say we at least prefer the politicians that lie to us on the things that we want to hear, which is what will affect our daily lives, and maybe lower housing costs, and maybe lower consumer costs, and maybe address some of the fundamental unfairness of the Israeli economy.
Okay.
And why we're seeing Kulanu's numbers tank right now, the center-right party, Moshe Kahlon, the finance minister, supposed to kind of lead a revolution, income inequality, housing prices coming down. We haven't seen it. As a result, Kulanu's numbers are coming down. It's an opportunity for another socially minded, economically minded party in the center to take those votes and run with them.